All right. So, hello, welcome to our Mission Control webinar. This webinar series is presented by Certiverse. If you're not familiar, we are an all-in-one end-to-end online exam development and delivery platform. Our award-winning technology is designed to make every step of test creation more efficient, more inclusive, and less costly. We'd love to tell you more about how we do that. So after the webinar, please reach out by visiting certiverse.com and scheduling a time to chat. Okay. In order to keep this presentation to 30 minutes, we ask that in addition to putting in your location, put in any questions into the group chat and we will make sure to respond to them. All right, I think we have a nice crowd here. So with that, let's get started. My name is Baina Crowder, and I am the Director of Business Development for Certiverse. I will be your moderator today, and I'm joined by testing industry experts Jill Burrows and Jason Dion. And we're going to answer the question, when should you start a certification? Before we do that, Jill, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jill Burrows. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Certiverse. I've been around the certification industry now for about 25 years. As it says, I've been on both sides of the aisle, so to speak. I used to be at CompTIA, where I ran their certification program, and more recently at Amazon Web Services. But I've done many stints on the vendor side as well. So great to have you all here.
Thanks, Jill. Jason, will you tell our audience about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jason Dion. I am a cybersecurity industry expert. I worked with and around the government for about 20 to 25 years, including positions at the National Security Agency, the global lead for cyber defense for US Cybercom, and many, many other jobs over the years. I also worked as a college professor teaching IT certifications, mostly CompTIA back in those days. And then I started my own company called Dion Training. I sold that one after 7 years, and we did all the certifications for CompTIA, AWS, Azure, things like that. And now I'm off on my next adventure, which was I was the co-founder of Accolade, which is a IT and cybersecurity certification company that is really focused on skills-based, hands-on learning. And we use Certiverse as our testing platform currently for all of our knowledge-based portions of our exams, as we're building out the skills-based portion on top of that as well. So I'm going to be able to speak on anything in terms of how the platform works, why we chose that platform, why we started our certification business, and things like that. So glad to be here, and hopefully we'll make it educational for everybody.
Ooh, I love being surrounded by all these big brains. All right, so we have all been in the certification industry for some time, and so we all know like the benefits of certification programs. On the professional side, earning a certification allows you to demonstrate, competence in your chosen field, which can lead to career advancement opportunities, increased earning potential, and just overall professional recognition. And then equally as important for employers, certifications can be used to make hiring decisions, attract talent, and investing in employees just to make sure that they have the most up-to-date qualifications and skills. So given all of the benefits of certification programs, it's clear to see why an organization would want to launch a program. But as we know, just wanting to launch a certification program is just the beginning, right? There also has to be a need. So maybe Jason, what are the steps in determining the need for a certification program?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to figure out why you want to start your certification program. And for some people, it may be that you want to be able to have you have a product and you want to make sure people are certified to use your product so they can go out and have a business around that. For example, if you are a credit card price processor like Stripe, you may want to be able to have certified developers that can put a little badge on and say, I'm certified by Stripe to do this, and now they can work as a consultant. So it gives them validity, and now your product has better support as this network grows. In our case at Accolade, that's not why we did it. We did it because we saw a need in the certification space. In our world, in the cybersecurity world, there's currently this cybersecurity hiring gap, and we've all been talking about this for the last decade since 2015. There's 3.5 million jobs that we need filled by the year 2025, and we only have 1 million candidates, and so on and so on. Well, how do you find these certified candidates? There are organizations that already do cybersecurity certifications like ISC Squared, CompTIA, and others. The problem is most of those are knowledge-based certifications. They're A, B, C, D tests. They test if you know something, but not can you do something. And so with Accolade, what we decided to do was really focus in on areas that were either underserved, undercovered, or not using skills-based training. So our first certification program was based on the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is covered in other certifications, but they may cover it with one question on a 90-question exam. Our exam is fully covering it just on that one thing. So we can go much more in depth, and we are certifying somebody to do a job role, in our case, either being a member of a cybersecurity consulting team or being the leader of a cybersecurity consulting team if they're at our fundamental level or our practitioner level, because we have two different exams for that. So really it comes down to knowing your industry, knowing your use case, and then making a certification that is valued in that area. And this is a really challenging thing to do. And that's why you have to bring in an industry group of experts to help you do this if you don't have that knowledge yourself. In our case, we set up an advisory council. We have 25 to 50 people who are hiring managers, VPs, and executives across many of the major nationwide and multinational companies you've known and heard about, like Microsoft and BlackBerry and others. And we meet with them once a quarter and say, what are the challenges you're seeing in the field? And they say, we need people who know how to do this. We need people who know how to do this. And then we build certifications around those things, very targeted, very credentialed towards a single focus and a single job role. And that way we can give them candidates who know the thing that they need done. And it makes it easier for the hiring managers to find somebody, because these days there's just so many people applying for any given job, and it's hard to distinguish who they are. And certifications is one way that a hiring manager can have an easy button to say, if I have 1,000 candidates and only 10 of them have this certification, those are the 10 I'm going to interview. And so it helps get them into that hiring funnel. Jill, what are your thoughts?
It's funny that you started out that way, because I always say when someone asks me this question, what is your why? Why do you want to start a certification program? Why do you think you need one? And so when you talked about, where in the market do you see a need for this certification? You really need to understand your own market, your own niche, your own space. So I think the first step is finding what's missing, finding the gap. And so if you are like a CompTIA, they're a vendor neutral certification, if people aren't familiar with CompTIA. And so they do a wide gamut of topics. But if you're looking at sort of a product certification like an Amazon or a Microsoft, those needs are going to be very different, and your why is going to be very different. So understanding why you're doing it. If you're doing it just for a revenue stream, not a great why, because you don't know if there's a need. And I can tell you many times there have been people who built it for a revenue stream and no, they did not come. People did not come. So understand your market, understand why you're doing this. Are you doing it to enable people on your product, enable people on your staff to understand what they need to do for a job role? Just understand the market, do your market research before you go out and start building the certification, because a lot of people do it backwards, and that is just not something I've ever seen be successful.
No, that's a good point. You both bring up good points about understanding your audience and knowing your why, before you get started. So as someone in sales, I've worked with a lot of organizations who are considering launching their first certification program. They want a program, they have determined that there is a need and they're ready, right? But there's this concern about the resources needed to create a credible exam. So both of you have created certification programs. What type of resources are required? Now, some people think it's scary and they need a lot. Some people go into it blind. I don't need anything. Jill, what has been your experience?
So when you say resources, the whole sort of different connotations to that, but I'm going to start with, and Jason also alluded to this, he created an advisory committee of experts in the field across many different landscapes in the field. And he used those to figure out what exactly is needed to be certified. And I think that should be step one. You need to have some sort of advisory board, council made up of subject matter experts that can guide you in what this certification is supposed to be. And I think from there, then you also have to have the people that are doing the job every day. You need those subject matter experts. They are the key to making a successful certification program in a normal, reasonable amount of time. If you can get engaged SMEs, though, that is the be all end all for a certification program. So those I think are the most important resources, are your subject matter experts. I mean, you can talk about, on the actual test development side, you're going to need someone or something that understands psychometrics. You can't do a certification program, a true certification program, without doing the psychometrics involved in measuring. Because if you're not measuring, if the exam is, hitting on all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are necessary to grant the certification, it's not a valid certification program, and there's no point in doing it. So I'll let Jason go into kind of all of those sort of resources because he's just done that. So go ahead,
Yeah,
Jason.
I think those are great points, Jill. And that's the difference between a certification and just a exam, right? When in my training company, we created lots and lots of exams. I've personally written over 20,000 questions in the last 7 years for the different certification exams that we help our students practice for and to pass, including all the CompTIA exams. That's different. I can sit down, I can write a question, I could put it in my test engine and deliver it to students, but it's not psychometrically valid. It's not a certification exam. It's just a practice exam. If I want to make a certification program and a certification exam, you do need all these resources. You need a way to bring in the advisory council and that subject matter experts to guide what will be on there. Then you have to do what's called a job task analysis, where you say, okay, if this job role is, let's say, being a Zoom presenter, what are the things that a Zoom presenter needs to do? How often do they do them? And you'll list out the 50 or 100 tasks. And this comes from all of your SMEs who do this job on a daily basis. Then you have those 5 or 10 people who write those. You then get a survey of 50 to 500 people that go through and say, hey, based on my job as a Zoom presenter, I do this every day. I do this not at all. It's really important. It's not important. And there's a little button you'll check on the survey. And that will help decide what will be on the exam as far as racking and stacking the domains and objectives. Then you move into the question writing. And again, you need more SMEs for this. Generally, you're going to need 20, 30, 40 SMEs that do this on a daily basis so they can write questions about the job. As a Zoom presenter, I need to know how to share a PowerPoint. I need to know how to mute my microphone, whatever those things are. And they'll ask all those questions. Then once you do that, you go into a beta exam. And now you need candidates who will actually take the exam to see if what the real students who are taking are matching up with what you psychometrically expected to happen. And then you do all the statistical analysis. And for us, this is one of the things that Certiverse has been really helpful with is they have a PhD on staff, Dr. Mead, who is amazing. And he has helped us do all the psychometric stuff so that we as an organization don't have to have our own psychometrician and don't have to have that huge, large expense of paying for somebody who has a PhD to be able to help us with it when we do this, 3 or 4 times a year, because they have somebody who helps with certifications across the board for all of their customers. So it becomes a good shared resource. Once you do that and you get a statistically valid exam, then your exam can go live. You can either give it to your employees or you can sell it. In our case, we are a third-party company, so we sell it to end user candidates, and that becomes a revenue stream for us in our business because that's the way we operate. But I know some other companies, they're doing it as an internal certification program, in which case you'd be paying you wouldn't have to charge the students to take it. So those are some of the resources you need. Can this all be done offline with spreadsheets and PowerPoints and Zoom meetings? Sure, but it's a lot harder and it takes a lot more coordination. Most certification programs will take anywhere from 12 to 18 months from idea to execution. With Certiverse, you can get that down to about 6 to 8 weeks because of the automation that's involved, the system that's involved, and the ability of the for lack of a better term, hand-holding as you're building out your first program. Because when I was building my first program, I'd never built a certification program before, but the folks at Certiverse had done it multiple times. And so for us, it was kind of a no-brainer to go with them, and they can guide us along what we needed to do to create a statistically valid program that is industry accepted. And we've been getting great feedback from the people who have been taking the exam, as well as from our advisory council when they saw the results of what that exam turned out to be. Not that I'm trying to make this a pitch for Certiverse and advertisement because I don't work for them. It's just my personal experience with them. Although I'm sure they're happy I said that.
Jason, you talked about, never having built a certification program before, but we know that promoting your certification is important, right? It's
Oh, yeah.
crucial to attract your target audience to make sure that your program is successful. So, how are you able to find and engage your target test taker audience?
Yeah, this is probably one of the most challenging things. This all comes down to marketing and outreach, right? So for us, I have a little bit of an unfair advantage there because I own my own training company previously, and in the first 7 years running my training company, I took it from 0 students to 1.9 million. We're just about to cross over 2 million students this month that have been trained across different certifications, not my Accolade certifications. This is for CompTIA and AWS and Azure and all of those. So when I created Accolade, me and my co-founder created Accolade, we used our natural audiences that we had. He is also an instructor on LinkedIn and some other places, and he has a couple 100,000 people. So between the two of us, we had a rather large audience to begin with that knew us, liked us, and trusted us. even with that large audience, when we create a new certification, they don't know that certification. It's a new brand. I didn't create the Dion certification. If I did, I probably would have sold a lot more. But because we create a new company, we had to build up a brand around it. So if you already have a big company name, for instance, if you are, I'm going to use this example, Stripe again, because they're my credit card processor, and they want to create a Stripe certified blah, 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 people already know that brand. They already trust that brand. They will buy that certification because of that brand. But if you create a brand new company like we did, we have to now build the brand recognition around that. So some of the things we have been doing is working with our advisory council and the SMEs who help write the exam and reaching into their audiences. We do a lot of webinars. I speak at a lot of conferences. Just this week I was in San Francisco. In fact, I'm in Sacramento right now. I'm in Vegas this weekend. I'm in Dallas speaking at a conference on Tuesday, and then I'm going to Miami next week for a conference. And as I go to these conferences, I'm meeting with industry leaders. And in our case, the way we look at it is as a certification provider, we have a two-sided marketplace. One side is the end candidate. I need to convince candidates that my brand has reputation and trust, and then they should take my certification. The other side, on my case, because I'm teaching to a job and a skill set, is I need to convince the employers. And I'm not convincing the employers to pay me anything, but what I'm really trying to get them to do is go, oh, your certification has value. I know if somebody is an Accolade certified cyber resilience fundamentals or Accolade certified cyber resilience practitioner, they can do this job. And so based on that, we're asking them, please, when you're putting out a job for a cybersecurity consultant, put in the requirements. Must have CompTIA Security Plus, must have Accolade CCRF or CCRP. And if they do that, that's going to drive the candidate demand as well. And I will tell you, we've been doing this. Our first exam came out in November. Our second set of exams came out in May 1st, just a couple weeks ago. And we are getting a lot of uptake in it, but it's not, a rocket ship to the moon. It takes time because people have to know what you are. If we took our same certification and said CompTIA CCRF, they'd be able to sell a lot right away because they've been in the business since 1993. If you're Amazon or AWS, like Jill used to work for AWS, Amazon Web Services, they can put out a certification and everyone's going to take it because they're Amazon, right? If you are starting the Dion certification or the Accolade certification, people have to understand who you are. And you have to build that audience. So that is a challenge, and I'm not going to put it lightly. That is a big challenge that you have to be aware of. And again, this comes back to your industry and where you're going. And this is one of the reasons why when we created our first certifications, we went after a very dedicated niche area that there was no other certifications in, but we knew there was a need. We didn't go and create another AI fundamentals course or another security fundamentals course. There's plenty of those out there. And then I'd be competing with CompTIA's ITF plus certification, and they're just much bigger than me. I would never be able to have a chance. So we went into areas that were complementary to other certifications on the market, but not competing with other certifications on the market. And again, this just becomes a business and marketing issue that you have to deal with. Jill, your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I was at CompTIA many moons ago, I think that's really the strategy that we used. So I mean, CompTIA now is a pretty recognized brand, but at the time we used to always talk about getting mandates, and we would go through and we would have, so people who don't know, CompTIA is a membership organization for the IT industry, and we would go to our members in the same way that you kind of talked about the advisory committee. Is we would go to the members and say, what do you need? What job roles are you looking for? We're creating a certification around that. Will you mandate that? Will you require that? So that was really a strategy that CompTIA used quite a bit because of where their certifications sat. They were really entry level. They still are mostly entry level certifications in a vendor neutral space. Educational, higher education, community colleges, getting them embedded into any kind of curriculum would really drive and mandate volume and sales. So I think both of those two things work if you're kind of in that space that CompTIA is. For Amazon, I mean, again, it's Amazon. Everyone knows Amazon. It was slightly easier to grow that volume just because whatever Amazon touches turns to gold. But I will say the strategy there was slightly different in that we kind of went out to partners in the same way that we would go out to community colleges or those sort of things at CompTIA. And we would say, okay, if you want to be an authorized partner at Amazon, which was, the gold stamp, you have to have so many of your staff certified with these credentials. And so that really kind of pushed volume. Obviously, Amazon also certified their internal employees for enablement reasons. But those are sort of the strategies for both, for either if you're kind of a for-profit or if you're a not-for-profit, ways to go out and find your audience.
Yeah, and I'll say that we are doing both of those at Accolade as well. In ours, we're a certification in the cybersecurity world, and one of the biggest clients for certifications in the cybersecurity world is the Department of Defense and the U.S.
Yeah.
government. And so,
Yes.
in the Department of Defense, they have a thing called the 8140, which ties to different work roles. It says if you're going to be a network administrator, thou shalt have CCNA, which is Cisco Certified Network Associate. If you're going to be a level one manager, you must have CompTIA Security Plus. And because of that mandate, it's mandated to people in uniform, military members. It's mandated for government civilians, and it's mandated for their government contractors. So, right now at my old company, Dion Training, we are the #2 seller of CompTIA certifications in the world. The only
Wow.
person who beats us by volume is the US government because they buy their vouchers themselves, and then they go out third party for training, where we sell training and we sell training and vouchers. But after the US government, my small little company sells more CompTIA vouchers than anybody else in the world as of 2024. But that is because of that mandate. And so many of my students go, I need to have this to get the job with the government. I need to have this, or I lose my job in 6 months if I don't have it, because that's how that DoD instruction is written. And so
Yeah.
mandates are critically important. In our case, we are working to get on that mandate as CCRF and CCRP. And once we do, we know that'll raise our volume significantly as well. But in the meantime, we're working on the other side and getting employers to ask for our certifications. Because as a candidate who's going to buy a certification, the number one thing I tell my students all the time is when they say, should I get this certification? I say, well, go on LinkedIn, look at the job postings. Who's asking for what? And if you say
Okay.
there's this new certification called the PJBT, should I get it? Which is a penetration certification. I'm like, go look on LinkedIn. Is anybody asking for it? No? Then it could be great information. If you want to spend $1,000 getting it, it's great information. You'll learn something, but no one's going to care and nobody's going to hire you because of it. Most certifications are tied to a job, either getting hired or getting promoted. And that's what candidates are thinking when they're pulling out their credit card to buy your certification.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great point. Great point. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. In a previous Certiverse webinar, we talked about how the landscape of testing has changed. So with that in mind, Jill, you've mentioned how you've worked at large organizations and created certifications in the past, and you've also worked on the vendor side to help organizations launch programs for vendors, for organizations. So can you share how you think this changing landscape has impacted what it takes to create a certification program?
So I would say there's so many different things that kind of become buzzwords in the certification industry, and they sort of kind of roll in. I remember, back when in the early days when I was at CompTIA, security was a really big thing, and if you had to do certain things in development and in delivery that showed that you were securing your exam and you were putting into your due diligence. And I think that's one of those things that has stuck around today, but we look at it a little bit differently. So back in, many, many years ago, security was thought to be, it has to be an in-house testing center. You have to be there in person. It has to be brick and mortar. That's the only way it can be secure. We have to pat people down. And I mean, there was a really kind of a sense of that's the only way to do it. And that's how we've always done it. And I think obviously as the landscape has changed, as the world has changed, remote proctoring has really changed the game in a lot of ways for many people, because not only are brick and mortar test centers much more expensive to deliver at, they just are. You're not able to reach everybody that needs to get to your certifications. Your audience is smaller because test centers aren't everywhere. There are a lot of places, but they're not everywhere. So I think when the industry kind of COVID hit and the industry had to kind of turn on its head and look at it differently, remote proctoring really changed the landscape in how we deliver, where we can kind of take that audience, who we can include, not only in delivery, but in development. If you can remotely develop an exam, you can get perspectives and SMEs from all over the world. Back in the day, you didn't have to, but this is how it was done. We flew everybody into a room. We bought them lunch for an entire week, and we had 10 people who could get the day off, could get the week off, and were within flying distance, come in and sit in a room and write questions for us, on a spreadsheet. Nowadays, when we're helping clients, develop these exams, we have SMEs who are global, and they're writing exams. So you're getting a global perspective, which I don't know what brands are out there that don't want global perspectives on their certifications, but that was a game changer. And I think COVID and remote proctoring kind of just changed the industry in ways that I think going forward, we're just going to see more and more waves of that happening. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll tack on to that, and then I'll give you my perspective on this as well. But you mentioned global participation. When we did our exams, we had SMEs coming into us from Africa. We have one who's in Malaysia. We had some in Germany and the UK, and then a bulk here in the US and Canada. And the other thing is, instead of having to have 10 people flying in, our SMEs, we had a group of 50 to 100 SMEs. So we get much more diverse thought. We were able to do it much quicker because if I need to write 500 questions, I only have 10 people. They can write 10, 15 questions a day, and you need 1,500 questions for a CompTIA Security Plus exam. It will take you all week for those 10 people working 8 to 10 hours a day. For us, we opened up our question writing process, for example, for 2 weeks. And by the end of the 2 weeks, we had 50 or 100 different contributions, and each person may have only submitted one or two questions. And that's fine because we had 50 or 100 people that were doing this, right? And we got diversity of thought and the diversity of question writing. So I think that's really good. This is one of the areas of the certification industry that still bothers me, to be quite honest, and that the industry is not changing fast enough. And what I mean by that is I mentioned earlier the DoD 8570 and the 8140. There's a requirement if you want to get on that list, you have to be ISO compliant. To be ISO compliant under the ISO, which is International Standards of Organization, 17024, you have to have a proctored exam, which we can do now online. And
But
that's only
that
because
was
of the
just
exception of
recently
COVID.
changed. That
Right.
was
Because the last time they updated the regulation for ISO 17024 was 2018. And if you look at the official ISO pub, it still says, thou shalt go to a testing center in person, right? They made an exception in COVID. They have not rescinded that exception. So you can still use, as long as it's a live proctor online, it still will meet those standards. But the other issue is the way that they say you have to develop your exams doesn't support higher levels of skill-based training. It still is very, very difficult to get an exam that can go through that is not an A, B, C, D type of test. So if you want to be able to have something that is a penetration exam, a penetration testing exam, or an instant response exam, where you have a lab environment, the student has attacks coming at them, or they're running the attacks and going through and doing different things on a system and being graded, that is not ISO compliant. So even though it's a really, really good exam, it will still not be on that DoD mandate like a Security Plus or a Pen Test Plus will, because those are ABCD questions. And a great example of this is in the penetration testing world, which is ethical hacking and how do you break into computers. There are three main certifications out there. There is CEH, which is completely ABCD knowledge-based exam, which my personal opinion is not a very good exam. Second is Pen Test Plus by CompTIA. That one is mostly ABCD. Sorry, my computer likes to do. I want to hold up two fingers. I keep forgetting about that. Not going to hold up two fingers anymore. But yeah, CompTIA has Pen Test Plus, and it is mostly ABCD. And then they have 3 to 5 simulations at the beginning where you do a couple of really minor simulated tasks. And again, they were able to get that through the ISO process. The third one is OSCP, which is the Online Offensive Security Certified Professional. This one is actually the best one out there. It's a 24-hour exam. You log into an environment, you hack away, and then you have another 24 hours to write up a report after and submit it to be reviewed. And there's a live proctor watching it. They're not ISO compliant. Why? Because ISO doesn't value that because there's no way to do the statistical analysis on it the way that they currently write the regulations. And so this is one of the things that we're struggling with at Accolade because we want to be very hands-on and skills-based, but we also want to be able to be mandated by the DoD. And so we're fighting on both sides. We're talking with ISO and saying, you guys need to update your policies to allow for skills-based certifications because that's really important for the future of this industry. And we're also trying to work with the DoD to go, guys, look at this. You can see the quality of these exams that are coming out, and yet you're not valuing them in the military sense because they're not ISO compliant because your regulation was written back in 2003 that said you must have ISO compliance. And so the world's different. We can do different things now that we could 2003, right? We're 2024 at this point. And even the ISO standard was written in 2018. It's 6 years old at this point. They're not updating fast enough with the change in landscape. Think about AI and all the things we have nowadays. If you had an exam where you had to go in and do an interview with a virtual AI candidate and your responses could be spoken and transcribed and then checked by the AI and graded, that would be a great certification program. But you'll never get ISO certified as of the way it's written today. You'll never get that mandate. So these are the things you have to start weighing for yourself. And I met with the VP at Microsoft who does the Azure certification program, and she told me we're no longer doing ISO certification for exactly that reason, because we're tired of having our hands tied behind our back in what we can do. Now, for them, that's okay. They're Microsoft, they're Azure, right? Same thing with AWS. They're not ISO certified. They don't care. They're big enough. But because of that, the DoD doesn't mandate those certifications as part of their mandate. And so instead, as Jill said, AWS took it a different way and said, if you want to do it, you can be one of our partners. You have to have these to be able to get that gold star and that badge so you'll get more business. And that's really driven the sales. So you don't have to go ISO if you don't want to. And that's a decision we at Accolade are looking at. Some of our certifications will be ISO. Some we may not because we want to be able to do new and creative and innovative things using AI. And if they can't catch up with us, then we'll just do it the other way. But that is a challenge for a new certification because people don't know Accolade like they would AWS or Microsoft Azure, right? Those are big enough brands they can do what they want. The smaller guys are kind of getting pushed out because of that. And that's one of the things that needs to change in our industry over time. And hopefully we'll be able to get them convinced that that's the way to do it.
I am
So
going to pause things. Actually, just we are at time, but we do have a question in the Q&A.
Sure.
So if we can, if anyone, if people are available to spend additional time with us, we would be happy to continue answering questions if you have more beyond this first one. But we will just add this into the discussion. As far as how important do you feel that quality is in the creation of the exam, and as well with pricing? How do those factor in um, to the importance of that process?
Yeah, I'll be glad to take that one if you don't mind,
sure.
Jill. All right. So when it comes to quality, I think quality is number one. Quality is what you build your business on, right? If you don't have quality, you may get people to take your exam once, but once they take it, it's going to find out on Reddit, Facebook, LinkedIn, and everywhere else. Oh my gosh, this exam was horrible. It was a waste of my time. The questions were misspelled. The content wasn't relevant. Why did I waste my money on it? So regardless if it's free or $1,000, they're not going to ever want to take it again, and your reputation will precede you. When I built my company, Dion Training, the number one thing I built it on was quality. I never spent a dollar in advertising until 2020. By the time I did, I already had 200,000 students. And if you went on Reddit, Facebook, or LinkedIn and said, who should I take for CompTIA Security Plus? One of three names came up, and mine was always one of them in the top three because those were the three that were quality. And there are thousands of people who teach that course. So quality is number one in anything you do. Otherwise, people know bad quality. They're not going to pay for bad quality, and your reputation will get out. Second thing you asked was how important is that in factoring into the certification? You're building a certification, it needs to be quality because it needs to be respected. It needs to be respected by those who are going to spend their money to take it, and it needs to be respected by those who you're trying to serve with it. In our case, we're trying to help certify people for certain job roles. If an employer goes, oh, the Accolade certification is high quality, I can trust it. Now, anytime I see that on somebody's resume, I'm going to give them preference. That now tells candidates, you should go take Accolade because it's going to help you get a job. But they have to be quality on both sides. They both have to view you as quality. And then pricing. I'm really a big proponent of lower pricing, especially when you start out. Right now, our certification exams, our fundamental level is $125. Our practitioner level is $200. Those prices will go up over time, but we kept it intentionally low right now. And we make very, very little money on our certifications, but that's okay because we're in growth mode. We need more candidates out there taking our exams because the more they take it, the more they're putting those badges on LinkedIn. The more employers who have that, somebody who is on their staff that got it, and they go, oh, I can't tell you the number of candidates we've had that they went and took the exam on their own because they heard about us on LinkedIn, and now their entire company is taking our certification because the quality was there, and now they see how valuable it was. And then once we have that momentum, yeah, we can raise prices up to a normal level. There's wide varieties of levels of pricing on these exams. I've seen everything from $0 and free. I've seen it all the way up to $3,000 and $4,000 for an exam. In the
Mhm.
IT world, if you look at CompTIA, they're one of the biggest players at the entry level. They're around $300 to $400 for an exam. If you go up to something like Ethical Hacker, you're about $600 to $800. If you go up to CISSP, you're around $1,000. And generally, that's where I see it is somewhere between $300 to $1,000 per certification. But again, entry level should be very, very low cost. And if you're building a program that has multiple certifications in a path, the way CompTIA has, they have 6 certifications along their pipeline. Their entry level is like $200. The next one's like $250. The next one's like $300. And as you go up to their top level, it's like $500 or $600. And that makes sense because as you look at it, you're going to have a triangle, and the most people are going to take your entry level, and you're going to have a deterioration as you go up. So if 100 people take your lowest level, you might get 80 in your next level and 60 in your next level and 40 in the next level. And by the time you get to the top, you're only getting like 10 candidates. So the cost of developing these exams is the same, regardless of the level. But the higher your level, the higher your price is going to have to be to justify the time and expense you're doing, unless you're just using it as some other marketing in a larger business scheme. The way Amazon, honestly, they could make $0 on their certifications. It wouldn't matter to them because they're trying to get people certified to use their AWS cloud, which is where they make their money. For us, the thing we sell is certification. So we have to make it a profitable business model. And so right now we're starting low for high growth, but as we go over time, we will raise the price. But quality is number one. Pricing is also important. If your price is too high, nobody knows who you are, and you start with $1,000, it's going to be really hard to fill those seats. And you still need to get enough people in your beta to be able to get your exam certified as official before you go into live production as well. And so if you're too high on that, you'll never get enough candidates through. Jill, what are your thoughts from the industry experience as
So
well
I,
on
I agree with
quality versus
everything.
price?
I agree with everything you say. The only thing I really want to add is I think, you know, I have my stance is, you know, if you're not going to do it right, don't bother doing it. And I think that just ties again into everything. So, you know, traditionally the way people would develop exams, it's not cheap, it's very expensive. And so that would tie into the higher pricing that they would charge their candidates. And it's, you know, not to make this like sort of reverse commercial, but that's really kind of what we were trying to do here was how can we help develop exams at a lower price point so that the vendors and their, you know, then the programs can sell them at a lower price point, but still contain the quality that we want in the industry as assessment industry. So I think that's really important to realize that you don't have to give up the quality just, you know, if you're not able to spend $100,000 to develop these exams, there are ways to do that and still have a psychometrically valid exam. And really, if you can't do one that's psychometrically valid, it doesn't help anybody.
Yep.
Right. Well, this has been a great discussion. Jason, always a pleasure to have you. Jill, thanks so much for your insights. Thanks to everyone for joining us. If you have any additional questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us via our Certiverse LinkedIn, our personal LinkedIns, and then you see the email address there. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your attendance, and we will see you next time.